So, Paul, what's bugging you today?
Retirement, but not mine. People around me, accountants, CPAs,
Hmm.
even other bookkeepers who are around my age,
Hmm.
who are really thinking about cutting down their workload or semi-retirement or retirement.
Hmm.
That changes my network of people who I know, and I have to almost rethink the
Hmm.
whole bookkeeping practice from the very beginning because I'm going to lose a lot of my network.
Ooh.
And that bugs me. Like, what am I going to do? I have to start working with younger accountants
Hmm.
who I don't really know, and I have to go through that whole process again.
Yep. 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 Now, does this turnaround happen often, or is it just kind of really accelerating right now?
This is the first time that I'm really seeing it. I mean, it hasn't
Whoa.
really happened yet
Yeah.
because luckily, most of the CPAs and most of the accountants who I've worked with from the
Hmm.
very beginning
Hmm.
have been roughly very close to my age. So we've
Hmm.
worked together as a career. Maybe they're a little older than me, maybe they're
Right.
2 or 3 years younger than me,
Wow.
but it doesn't matter because
Hmm.
we're all older than 65.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
any one of us can retire at any given time or at the end of any given tax season.
Right. 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 Huh. So that's quite a disruption that hasn't happened before.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole new thing to me, and
Yeah.
and I have to kind of rethink. What do I want to do? Do I
Hmm.
want to work with younger accountants who may not be as experienced
Hmm.
and may not be as careful and as neurotic and compulsive than some people I work with,
Sure.
or do I want to start really semi-retirement and
Right.
find something else or do something different? I don't I'm that's bugging me. That's it's floating around in my head and I don't know what the next move is.
Yeah,
That's one reason for the podcast, by the way. I love doing the podcast and
mm,
that's like a second career.
mhm, mhm. So the reason for the podcast was to find the reason for the podcast was to find people to replace the other people?
No, the
No.
the the reason for the podcast was because I didn't want to teach in computer schools anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
It was eating up too much time,
Mhm.
and I was getting paid more money doing bookkeeping than
Mhm.
I was standing in front of a class for
Mhm.
8 hours. And so I I kind of reluctantly walked away from that, and I
Mhm.
found after several months that I was really missing teaching.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, well, I experimented with a podcast back in 2017 or
Mm.
18. And I said, maybe I should look into webinars or podcasting or something.
Mhm.
And and the rest of that story is in an episode in the podcast on how I met you. But the rest is kind of history because the podcast is growing and
Right.
it has definitely taken the place of teaching and it's extremely satisfying. I mean, I love doing it.
Hmm. Well, I'm still thinking about the problem of having to find all new people. Ugh. I mean, is it really all happening at once, or are they kind of the
Well, no,
retirements are
it's not.
spaced
No,
out?
it's not happening all at once. It's going
Okay.
to be one at a time.
Sure.
And for most of it, I mean, yes, my clients are probably going to say, "Well, is there anyone else in your network who you
Mhm.
can recommend?"
Yeah.
And if I say no, then the clients are going to, they're going to have to find another
Mhm.
accountant,
Mhm.
and then it's just you don't know what you're getting
Right.
until the first tax return. So I'm going to have to deal with a lot of new people
Yeah.
unless I can expand my network now. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure how to do that. I don't want to start going to meetings again
Mhm.
the way I did 30 years ago just to meet people. I really don't want to do networking,
Well, I
but I
mean,
may have to.
you might be doing it right now by putting this video out there into the world. You
That's
might
very
be,
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
attracting more people that you could work with in the future. So, I mean, with that in mind, what are you said you're looking for accountants?
Well, I'm looking for tax preparers. I mean,
Tax preparers. Okay.
CPAs, accountants. I generally don't like larger firms. I do have a
Mhm.
client who just switched. to a kind of a medium sized to smaller accounting firm,
Mhm.
and they're very personable. I've had a couple of meetings with both of the partners, and I really like them. So
Mhm.
without even looking for it, I now have one addition to my network,
Oh, great.
and they
Okay.
might give me some clients, I might
Mhm.
give them some clients. So maybe if I get a little bit of luck, as each person starts to cut down or semi-retire, I'll
Mhm.
be able to replace with someone else myself.
Sure, sure. And I would imagine that the people that are retiring would have someone in mind to refer people to, wouldn't they?
Maybe,
Yeah.
possibly, but their network might be people around their
Mhm.
age too.
That's true.
It's a whole
Yeah.
generation. I mean, there's an article that I read just a couple of weeks ago. There's a whole generation of accountants
Mhm.
who are in the next 3 to 4 years are predicted to retire,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that's a very quick amount of time for
Mhm.
thousands of accountants to hang it up after many years.
Right, right. It is. It is, it is, it is.
And
Yikes.
and what it who is going to replace
Mhm.
the accountants who've been doing it for 30, 35, 40 years?
Mhm.
Inexperienced people right out of school, no, not no diss to them, but they don't have the experience of someone doing it for 30 years.
Right, right. Well, true, but how do they get experience if they don't work?
Well, right, that's a double-edged
It
sword. I mean, you
is,
get
yeah.
experience by doing more and more and more tax
Right.
returns. But I find that generally the younger generation of workers don't have the passion that my generation of workers do.
Mhm.
Generally,
Mhm.
there's lots of exceptions to that rule, but in general, because I know a couple of young accountants, and they don't go through the books
Mhm.
to really make sure the bookkeeping is right. They'll basically take the numbers that you give them,
Mhm.
and they'll check payroll and they'll check the things that the IRS looks for. But other than that, they don't really go through line by line to make sure that everything makes sense. But the older
Mhm.
accountants do.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty good at what I do, and I get called a lot.
Yeah.
For little mistakes, nothing that's going to get anyone audited, but just little things, because accountants my age have the passion that I
Mhm.
have, and that's why we make such a good team.
Well,
Younger
why?
accountants don't have that.
What was it in how they, because you're talking about passion, but you're also talking about diligence and like being detail oriented. That the
Right.
detail oriented stuff sounds like it's something that was either taught or not taught. Do you know what I mean? Like what
Well, that's part of it.
changed?
That's
Yeah.
part of it. But one of the things, I think there's a couple of of episodes that I've mentioned, that when QuickBooks Desktop came out, they
Mhm.
kind of changed the rules from day one.
Mhm.
They marketed their product as to how easy it is to set up, how easy it is to use. Anyone can do
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm.
without actually saying it, they basically said, you don't really need a bookkeeper. You can do it yourself. And people
Mhm.
started to believe that. And that's why
Right.
the quality of bookkeeping overall has gone down, and the
Mhm.
quality of accounting has gone down.
Mhm.
And I kind of blame Intuit on that. That's why Intuit will never
Mhm.
be a sponsor of the podcast, because they're not going to want to hear me say that. But and I'll say it publicly. I am
Yeah.
amazed that Intuit has not had a class action lawsuit against them
Right.
for that,
Right.
because they really changed the rules, and they've changed the bookkeeping profession that I've
Mhm.
always been proud of to be in.